Hey everybody, I am surrounded by female greatness. I'm really, really excited today because it's Meredith Vieira and Diana Gabaldon, and super exciting to talk about the Great American Read.
Yay!
So I think we're all book lovers, so that's super exciting. Yes. I just want to talk about the show just in general at first. It's down to 10, like, finalists.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
So
we will pick the number one book in the finale. So, but this started way back, even prior to May. PBS conducted a survey, and this was just a cross-section of Americans and came up with the 100 most loved novels, put the list together, and in no particular order, and then just urged people over the summer to read. And what we found is that they did. Not that we were worried they wouldn't, but the number of people who read and were enthusiastic and wanted to share their experience and vote, 4 million votes, which is a lot. And these books, you know already because you're an author. I didn't realize they're fanatics, these fans. I mean, they have a book they like and do not get in their way. And you'll see that at the finale. I mean, everybody, and that's great. It's so wonderful to see that people can be passionate about reading. And that was the whole point of the series, to remind people how great it is to fall in love with a great book.
well, and reading is, it's such an escape from like everything else. And the thing about a book is it doesn't change. Like, I feel like a lot of things online, like, there's a lot of give and take, and maybe your reaction to it changes.
And that's what's special,
but that character
too.
stays the
Right.
same. So,
But you literally read more things into it each time you read a book. And that it's so much fun. It's like having an old friend and getting back together and, I didn't know that about you. That's pretty magical.
It is. Diana, your fans, I assume, have been super, super excited.
Oh, yes.
your
No, they've
book.
been beside themselves. In fact, one of the PBS producers said, I'm so amazed at the ferocity with which they vote. They just don't stop.
Well, you've written something that really resonates with people, for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I like about the book series the most is that it grows. Like, the women, Claire and Jamie, age.
They do.
And I think that is nice. A lot of books, it's kind of like they had this young time and then it's done.
Exactly.
Like,
this
end
is
of
why
story.
romance novels are, singles. You don't have sequels in romance novels. Sometimes you will take up with, the heroine's friend, and now it's her story, and so forth. But a romance novel is a courtship story, and they're good books. I enjoy reading them, but that's not what I wanted to do. And I realized I wrote Outlander for practice, mind you. And anyway, it got
so annoying. This one.
Oh yeah. Well, it got published, and they offered me a 3-book contract. So, anyway, it was obviously going on, and I was, exploring their further life and so forth. And it occurred to me, what I want to do is tell the story of a marriage. Everybody can tell, intuitively and from experience, what it is that draws people together, what's attractive to them and all that. What is it that makes them stay married 50 years or more?
Yeah.
And the fact that romance lasts, it's not just something in your 20s.
Oh, no.
It goes to your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And that's so wonderful to have that story out there for people my age and also young people.
Yeah. And it gives you, look ahead.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Things aren't over in your 20s. I didn't even feel like I got started till my 30s.
No,
so,
Well, you kind of didn't, as you said.
Yeah, not in my career.
Right.
Yeah. I got started later. That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally fine. What book, has any book surprised you?
Well,
As far
it
as
wasn't
its popularity.
PBS's list. So there were
'cause
books
it
that
was-
surprised. Yeah, they had the survey conducted. So I remember when it first came out, and one of the books was 50 Shades of Grey. And I hate to put that book down. I don't mean to. But a lot of people go, PBS? So, no, PBS didn't. But Americans did.
Yeah.
And, that book got people reading. Good for that author. Good for that book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I liked about that list was the huge diversity of it. And because people are saying, oh, well, this book is, lots better than that book and so forth. And I said, no, it's not about what book is better. It's what is your favorite book? What book makes you feel good, feel fulfilled, whatever. And at different times of your life, that can be a totally different kind of book.
And in that sense, every one of the books is a winner.
Yes.
Because ultimately we're celebrating reading. It isn't one particular book. It's that joy of reading and of sharing books with other people.
Yeah, I a couple books on the list too. Jane Eyre was a real turner for me. I remember the first time I read it, I was 16. And I was going to a new school. I went to a new school every year from 7th grade till I graduated.
Oh, dear.
So,
You like an army brat or something? Were
no,
you-
my dad worked for FedEx.
Oh.
And we moved a lot. But anyway, they Jane Eyre was on this list of books I had to read for the summer. And I was like, pick. And it just really spoke to me. I still love it. And then I found out later it was my grandma's favorite book too. And she was a girl, but I was glad it was on the list. So things like that, like, come back. Some of those books you read in school really come back.
They do.
And some of the books on the list you go to for the first time.
Yeah.
And Outlander was that for me.
Oh,
I had
okay.
not read it. I met Diana. I really liked her. And I went, I'm going to pick up this one. And I had friends who'd watch the series who said, you're going to like it. And love a kilt, I have to admit. And it was fantastic. So, and she's such a wonderful writer. So without the series, I don't know that I would have. There's so many books out there that unless someone specifically tells you about it or you have an experience like this, you're not exposed to it necessarily.
Yeah, Outlander, somebody had told me about years ago. And at the time I had really small kids. And to be honest with you, I just was like, who has time to read?
Yeah, exactly.
And, and then later I picked it up and I loved it. Oh. And it actually is how I started working here.
Oh, really?
At Paste was, I called up the editor. I'd met him at a thing and I said, hey, I'd love to work for Paste and make videos. And so we met for lunch. I took my kids with me. And I said, what about Outlander? That's coming out on TV and I love that book. And he was like, yeah, great. And here I am.
No, very good.
Wow. Bonding.
So your book meant a lot to me.
Oh,
but
yes, absolutely.
but when I picked it up, I loved it.
That's great.
What kind of books do you think on the list? I was thinking about ones from childhood. Is there one from like your teens or your childhood that is on the list that really has stuck with you?
Well, good
Are you
question.
excited to see?
Yeah. There were several. I'm trying to think which ones. Oh, Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, that is actually one of my very favorites from the whole list. Someone was saying, what are your favorite off this whole list? That was a tie between Alice in Wonderland and Lonesome Dove.
Oh, yeah. Hard to beat those.
And I love To Kill a Mockingbird. I read it when I was 13.
Yeah.
So many people, a very important book in my life at that time, continues to resonate with me. But then Charlotte's Web.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it as a kid, and to read it to my own children. We each have 3 kids, and I've read it at least 3 more times as an adult. And it's one of those books where, you read it as a kid and you get whatever you do out of it, which is a real lesson about friendship. But then as an adult, you realize just how deep that lesson is in that book. I don't think I've ever read a book that explains friendship and defines it quite as well as that book does.
Yeah,
and who would have thought it? Like a pig and a spider and a rat? But hey,
Yeah, but it makes sense.
totally. It does.
There were a couple on the list, and that one I've read to both my kids too. When I would come home and they're like, "Oh, it's gonna be Charlotte's Web," I was like, "Oh yes!" Some of those books they come back with your kids, and you're like,
kind of going,
Yeah, I know.
yes, maybe.
Yeah.
But
"It did." The list does make me want to maybe give Harry Potter a try. I still haven't read that book, and
you
I'm
ought to
like,
try
I feel
it, yeah.
behind. I've seen the movies, but
Well, I'm not a big.
books are better.
I'm not a fantasy person, and my friend urged me to read Game of Thrones. In fact, he said you must. It was threw down the gauntlet, and I said okay, and I'm still not quite done with it because it's not my genre, but I've tried it, and I realized that if a book has a map at the front of it, it's going to be a problem, and names that you can't relate in any way because they make no sense. But I've tried at least. So, and that was another mandate of the list. Just go out on a limb with some books. You never know.
yeah, even if you start and you put it down, well,
Absolutely.
you tried.
You tried.
And the other thing is, it's just great to it's great that there's so much variety and there's something for everybody, and books don't leave people out.
that's right.
Right.
Everybody can find something to read, which is wonderful.
Well, we were talking with Will Wheaton, the actor, and he admits that as a middle schooler, he felt very alienated from other people. He was a nerd. He didn't fit in. But in some of the books that he read, it was cool to be a nerd, and he found his place. And he might not have without the help of a book. And I've heard that repeated by so many people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. You do kind of identify. And I think the thing about a book is that you're in it more than like with a TV or a movie where somebody's projecting it to you. When you're reading a book, you're kind of part of the story. At least I always felt part
Absolutely.
of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a very different experience.
I often don't like to see after I've read a book a movie of it or a series because I've created my image of those characters. I've gone beyond what the author has given me and fleshed it out, and I don't want to see somebody else.
else's idea.
Yeah. Go, that's not, you're not that person.
I will say, too, that's one thing about your book. I was really glad it wasn't a movie. After I read it, I was like, oh, please don't tell me there's a movie. They didn't condense this into a 2-hour film.
Exactly.
So it would have been ruined. It's so much better as a series. It definitely holds up. But I was like, oh, my goodness. I don't want this condensed.
No, you don't.
It's so small. Yeah, and we actually have a rule at our house. You have to read the book before you see the movie.
Oh, that's a good
seems good.
rule.
Yeah.
So, kind of mean maybe, but
Hey, well, you're lucky. I mean, you have 2 boys you were telling us before we went on, and both of them are avid readers, especially your older. And you don't find that as often with boys. At least that's been my experience.
yeah, I think always being exposed to books, super important. And having a little more free reign about, what they can read or can't read. Like, I
Right.
try to be pretty open about it because, books have been through an editor. They've been, processed. And I just feel like, we give kids internet with all kinds of stuff that hasn't been filtered. I mean, I don't really, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
But
yeah.
with a book, this has been read and vetted and, at some point it grows their mind. Even if it has something bad in it, at least in a book, we can discuss it.
Yeah, I can address it.
And when you think about the number of books that were banned at one point, simply because
goodness.
people were closed-minded and for whatever reason didn't want that story told, that speaks a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Exactly so. Well, what my mother said when I was young and reading stuff, because I would read anything. And once in 6th grade, I was trying to get a copy of The Moon Spinners by Mary Stuart, because I had seen the movie and I wanted to read the book. Yeah. And the librarian kept taking it off my pile and putting it under her desk because she was saying, you're not old enough to read that. So I complained to my mother, who went down and talked to the librarian and said, no, let her read anything she wants. And so the whole library was open to me. But she said her take on it was that if I understood what I was reading, I was old enough to read it. And if I didn't understand it, it would just go right over my head and I wouldn't be harmed by it.
I think
That's
that's
a good
true.
mom, yeah.
That's very true. Kids sometimes, we read back to. I've watched a movie or read something again. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I read this when I was a kid.
I didn't see that at all.
But I didn't even process
Right.
what
Exactly.
was going through my mind.
Exactly, yeah.
Not in an adult way, at least.
Right.
No, you just you got no frame of reference, so you just brush it off and you think, geez, that seems funny, But
What are you reading these days, out of curiosity? If you even have time.
Oh, yeah. I read. I've read some Susanna Kearsley, which I kind of
she's
like.
very good, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of a newer author. Well, she's not new, but I've recently discovered, and I like it a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of romance, but again, it's more grown-up women. It's not always an 18-year-old,
Right,
Not
right,
that there's anything
exactly.
wrong with that. There isn't, but,
Yeah.
some stuff like that. I do kind of want to try Lord of the Rings, because my sons
Let me
have
know how
read
that
it.
goes.
Yeah.
But it's very long, and I'm like, but maybe I should try it.
Well, it's the sort of story that sucks you in.
Does
If you
it?
make it through the first 50 pages, you won't put it down.
I'm gonna
But
give
that
it 50.
idea of 50 pages is a lot.
I'm going to give it 50 pages. Do you think this show has made anybody go back to the library?
Well,
I
hope so,
think it
but
has, yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. But, books are so much more available to us now, especially if you read digitally. I have fallen victim to BookBub myself. It comes up every day, and I can't resist looking at the list.
Me too.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I probably buy 3 or 4 books a week off that, which is going to pile up on my Kindle.
Yeah, I have a stack growing from BookBub as well.
We've had an
Steals.
amazing amount of support from libraries around the country and PBS stations to keep the conversation going and to encourage people to use facilities like libraries, to come back in, get your library card and look at the stacks of books. I mean, there's something so appealing. As a kid, I remember doing that. It was like going into this fairyland, and all these things were accessible.
Yeah.
You could walk out with them even, and you wouldn't be stealing them. That's
Right.
just like, wow. So, yeah, I think it probably has encouraged that, and hopefully overall book sales and people going to bookstores. I mean, we don't know for sure, but we've had a great response. We do know that.
Yeah.
And a lot of votes, close
Yeah,
to
for
4
sure.
million.
I mean, 4 million is a lot,
Yeah.
especially for something that's not so pop culture driven.
Right.
Which I loved that too. Is
Yeah.
it's like, well, yes, there's fandoms. Diana knows all about a fandom, but and Harry Potter fans and whatnot. But it's not completely pop culture driven,
Right.
which
Right.
I really love. That it's something that people can relate to for so long of their life. Book
But
always
writers
comes back.
like Diana, writers like J.K. Rowling, they have made reading fun and cool, and it's to a whole new generation.
Yes.
Certainly in J.K. Rowling's case, I mean, you had little kids suddenly standing in line for hours for a book. That's amazing.
And a real book.
And a real
big
book, yeah. So
it's not a 200-pager.
Right. But that's what we hope to do.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely worked. I've really enjoyed the show. And I've loved looking back and hearing people talk about their favorite books.
Yeah.
Like what really motivated them or what drove them to like it. I did like one Oklahoma book on there.
The Outsiders?
Yeah. That was very cool. I was glad to see. My son's middle school, they do an Outsiders, like a whole quarter on it. And they come, at the last day, they come dressed up as, the two sections, and it's a whole thing.
That is really neat.
Outsiders Day. It's a big deal in 7th grade.
Wow.
But I lived in Oklahoma for a couple years.
Oh.
And that's a tough time in the life of kids. I mean, that 7th, 8th grade, books like that can really help get you through that period.
We can go be alone and be with someone else.
Yeah.
Someone you like. Right. Someone that doesn't make fun of you back.
Right.
With a book, you'd be like, oh yeah, I can totally see it.
That book did very well among our Oklahoma readers, by the way. It was high up on the list. No
Not
surprise there. Yeah, right.
Not surprised. When you're in a smaller state, it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. That's a sense of pride.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is that something rose.
Right.
Right. It's on the list. Will there be anything else with the Great American Read?
I would hope so. We have folks that
Why
you
not?
can't see off camera. We're begging.
Yes.
I'd love to see it come back.
Be an annual thing.
Be an annual thing would be fabulous.
I would love it. And the thing is, it's so comforting at this. I feel like people on whatever spectrum they're on have just got their panties in a wad. And to be honest with you, it's very nice to sit down and watch a show with someone who is very comforting. I find you very comforting, Meredith, and very stable, and always have.
Well, the stable part.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about.
But I know what to expect from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a friendly
you.
face, and then it's dealing with books that people love. So
Exactly.
what's
and
that's
people's
good for
emotions,
people.
and you're seeing all these people. Some you know, some you don't, and they're all very real and very human and very touched by what they read on a piece of paper, a page. And how it's changed their lives. That to me is very transformative.
Yeah, it is. That a book can change.
Yeah.
Like your whole
Perspective.
Yep. on an issue. And when it's fiction, it's almost like you're learning without learning.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you sit down and read a history book, you're like, okay, I had to learn that. But you sometimes pick up something.
Yeah.
Or you see
here's
yourself
historical.
in the book suddenly, or a solution to something you're going through.
Or you might just sympathize with something that you hadn't considered.
Exactly.
Like I'm sure for people, when To Kill a Mockingbird came out, or some of those other really timely books, it gave a window into a season that otherwise you just wouldn't have. Or Lonesome Dove, another one. It gives you a view.
Well, I know in my case with To Kill a Mockingbird, I had never experienced racism or prejudice. I grew up in a ranch house in the suburbs of East Providence, Rhode Island, and to suddenly see this world and to have Scout as my guide, a little girl, so I automatically connected to her, and here she is growing up with this, and a lot of it is about the sort of loss of innocence, but also where we are as a country and what we do with the negative areas of our lives, and all of that. And at 13, I was trying to sort of determine who I was as a human being and what my moral compass was about. And that book helped me tremendously.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of books on that list that have that same power, for sure.
Yeah, it just kind of gives you a window.
Yeah.
And it feels more, you can relate to it a little easier.
Totally.
And there's no judgment to
Right.
how you feel about it. 'Cause no one's talking back. You're just
Well, from the other end, as a writer, and what people
Yeah.
say to me about the
Oh.
books and so forth, sometimes it's quite amazing, and sometimes it's something I did not actually intend to have a particular effect, but
I'm
it did,
sure.
or whatever. But I get a large number of they talk about everything. One of the things is that they enjoy being educated while being entertained. You mentioned history; they're saying, "Oh my God, I thought history was so boring," but it's not.
Yeah.
That's great. But sometimes my favorites are the weird ones. There is a scene in the 8th book of the series where Claire saves someone who's having a bad asthmatic attack, by getting him to do a particular sort of breathing technique. And it's in some detail because it's a long scene. Anyway, I've had to date 3 separate people who wrote to me with the subject head, "You saved my life." And they said, I have asthma and I was having a hideous attack. I didn't have an inhaler and I fell on the floor and I remembered, what that breathing technique was. And she says to the man who's having it, she said, "Keep doing that. You can do that all day. You won't suffocate." And I said, I did that. And finally the spasm let go. So,
oh my
that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, see, I wasn't writing first aid, but if it works that way,
I'm glad
great.
you write accurately.
Yeah, my God.
Wow.
We're going to have to start calling you doctor.
But you have a science background.
Yeah.
I do, yeah. I
Oh, that's right,
legitimately
you
have
are a
one.
doctor. Yeah. That's true. You already got that down.
Yeah, that's amazing. But it is amazing just what you glean.
Yeah, no, it's just remarkable. And then for some people, it's, as you say, self-image and things like that. I write a subset of books which draw off one of the minor characters, Lord John Grey, who, very interesting guy. He's, an 18th century nobleman, a soldier, really, great guy, very solid, very honest, honorable, brave, etc. But he's gay, which was a capital offense in England in the 18th century. If anyone ever finds out, he not only is he likely to be hanged or imprisoned for life, but his family will be ruined, his regiment will be disgraced, everybody he loves will be devastated. Yeah. And so, he lives with this constant conflict of, because he accepts himself. He doesn't, loathe himself for this or think it's a celestial mistake or anything. He's very pragmatic, not religious. But at the same time, he has to walk this fine line. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who knows that he's gay or not? Who doesn't know? And so forth and so on. And I get letters from a lot of gay men saying how much they identify with him, especially those in the armed forces. And they say, well, I probably would not be flogged or imprisoned if anyone found out, but it wouldn't be good. And so I know just what he feels like.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Give somebody something to identify with.
Yeah, which
sure.
Again was not my motive, but I don't write books with a motive other than to tell the story that comes to me. But I'm always happy when people draw from it.
Do people ever suggest ideas to you moving forward? Like, boy, we'd love to see such and such? Or?
Oh, yeah, but I just ignore them. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have more than one reader, that's physically impossible to satisfy all of them.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, no, I just don't. Yeah.
Thanks for your
Except
your
sometimes
thoughts.
you do talk back on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she does.
She does?
Well, it depends what people say to me, No,
I love it when you do.
Yeah, well, I very seldom do.
Yeah, I know.
I stumbled across a thread last week where this one woman was, carrying on and on about what she assumed to be my motivations and not forcing the show to be exactly like the book. And she was saying my actions were obviously tainted by greed and so forth. And anyway, I didn't waste time reading the whole thread. I saw something of that. She said it's very, very important for me to understand the point of view and motivations so I can understand the situation that's transpiring. And I wrote back and I said, if it's important to understand my point of view and motivations, why the F didn't you ask me? I don't usually use language like that, and I said F, not otherwise, and also room, But I said, I almost never block anyone, but for you, I'll make an exception.
Wow.
Boom.
Drop the mic.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, I'm so glad you guys came today.
Thanks for
and
having
talked to me
us.
about
Pleasure.
books,
Thank you.
One of my favorite things. And I'm hoping there'll be a season 2. And definitely everybody should
so,
watch on
definitely.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yes,
At 8 o'clock.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Everybody's
PBS.
going to love it.
Yeah.
Yes, because PBS is great.
Yes, it is.
And it's
They
free.
always do a good job.
Y'all.
Even better.
But that's why you need to keep contributing to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because
yes. Because it's just brought so much just joy and education into the homes of so many.
Exactly right.
Just through child's programs
Yeah.
or through these adult programs. Always learning something.
Exactly, and we want to keep doing it. So.
Yes, definitely. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Our pleasure.